St. Patrick's Day, so I'm wearing green. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. There are a couple interesting things about the long game, and neither of them are the story itself. It's a fine story. It's kind of a middling story, not the worst of the season, not the best of the season. It's a perfectly fine mid-season thriller. No, the first interesting thing about this story is that it features a guest appearance by Simon Pegg as the villain, the editor. Well, the secondary villain. The main villain is a CGI shark blob thing attached to the ceiling. But be that as it may, Simon Pegg, when this story was filmed in 2004, was not yet the international star he is today. He hadn't quite broken out yet. He was certainly well known in the United Kingdom, specifically for his television series Spaced. But in 2004, he had just finished filming Shaun of the Dead, which subsequently was released to international acclaim just before this story first aired. So by the time I saw this story, a solid 8 or 9 months after it first aired, I had actually just recently seen Shaun of the Dead and fallen in love with Simon Pegg. And I was only just discovering Spaced myself. So I thoroughly enjoyed seeing him on Doctor Who, and he, I gather, was perfectly thrilled to be a villain on the series. He had grown up loving the show and was delighted to be cast in it. The second, more structurally interesting thing about The Long Game is that it lays out Russel T Davies' economic sensibilities. This was originally supposed to be the first Dr. Light episode, a story in which the Doctor and Rose would be barely in the story. They'd be off filming another episode at the same time. And instead, the story was going to focus almost entirely on the character of Adam. Also, much like Tom Baker's early stories, The Ark in Space and Revenge of the Cybermen, this story is set in a location that will be reused again in a later story this season. That means that quite a few sets are built and then reused for 2 stories and actually 3 episodes. So between those 2 cost savings, it allowed Doctor Who to have 13 full episodes instead of 12 and to really stretch the BBC's budget much farther than it would have gone otherwise. Now, in the end, the characters of Rose and the Doctor wound up being much more amplified in this story, mostly because Russel T Davies just loved the synergy between Rose and the Doctor and how great Billie Piper and Christopher Eccleston were together on screen, and so he beefed up their part of this story. But we will see that notion of a Dr. Light episode come into play in the next several seasons, with stories like Love and Monsters and Blink and Midnight. But we'll get to those in a couple of weeks. The final interesting thing about the story is it marks the only time in the history of Doctor Who that the Doctor kicks a companion out of the TARDIS for bad behavior. Even Turlough, who was actively a villain for the early part of his run, was eventually embraced, brought into the fold, and became a regular traveling companion. But not Adam. Adam's greed and self-centeredness runs completely counter to the Doctor's sensibility, and he ends the story by dumping Adam back at home and confining him to a boring life on Earth. And deservedly so. But that did make for an interesting contrast in character exploration, comparing Adam to companions like Rose and classic companions like Sarah Jane Smith, Jo Grant. And so, once again, Russel T Davies mines interesting new territory in a series that is ostensibly decades old and where theoretically every new idea should have already been had. And that concludes this story. It's the last middling story of the season. From here on out, it is nothing but spectacular. I am so keyed up for the next 5 days, you have no idea. And it all starts tomorrow with Father's Day. I'll see you then.